The family dinner was meant to be a gathering of warmth and togetherness, a celebration of longevity, shared histories, and the comfort of familiar faces. It was one of those rare occasions when multiple generations came together under one roof, filling the dining room with voices, laughter, and the rhythm of clinking glasses and passing dishes. The setting was a large wooden table, polished and worn by decades of family dinners, sprawling with plates of traditional dishes that carried the legacy of recipes handed down through generations. Grandpa sat at the head of the table, his silver hair catching the glow of the chandelier, eyes twinkling with a mix of pride and nostalgia. Around him were children and grandchildren, nephews and nieces, uncles and aunts, a crowd that represented the complex tapestry of family life. The air was thick with a blend of joy and underlying tension, a delicate balance between celebration and the careful navigation of old wounds. At first glance, the scene was idyllic. Cousins shared jokes, couples exchanged smiles, and the older relatives reminisced about the past with fondness and occasional bittersweet sighs. The room was alive with stories, some light-hearted, others tinged with regret or longing, all forming threads that bound the family to its shared history. Yet, beneath these convivial layers, subtle undercurrents pulled at the edges of the gathering. Family dynamics always simmered quietly under the surface, rarely acknowledged but always felt. Generations divided by differing values, siblings who once loved fiercely but now held grudges, and unresolved conflicts softened only by time but never fully healed. These tensions threaded through conversations like invisible lines, shaping the way people looked at each other, the pauses between words, and the guarded expressions behind polite smiles. There was Aunt Clara, always sharp-tongued, observant, and fiercely protective of what she considered family honor. She sat slightly apart from some relatives, her eyes scanning the room with an intensity that suggested memories and judgments not easily forgotten. Her relationship with many family members had always been strained, shadowed by past disagreements and a deeply rooted need to maintain control over family narratives. My cousins gathered near the center of the table, their youthful energy a counterbalance to the more solemn exchanges of the elders. Yet, even within their group, quiet alliances and rivalries flickered like unspoken secrets. The youngest children, oblivious to the complexities, played quietly by the fireplace under the watchful eye of their parents. The meal itself was a feast of shared heritage, roasts seasoned with spices from old family recipes, fresh bread baked that morning, salads bursting with vibrant colors, and desserts rich with flavors that held memories of past holidays. Plates were passed, and glasses raised in toasts to health, happiness, and prosperity. The clatter of cutlery kept time with bursts of laughter and heartfelt speeches. Conversations ebbed and flowed, ranging from mundane daily affairs to more significant discussions of family events, upcoming gatherings, and subtle hints about inheritance and legacy, a topic that often hovered unspoken but palpably present. Eyes sometimes lingered a moment too long when the subject arose, and voices lowered ever so slightly, hinting at concerns that ran deeper than polite dinner chatter. In the midst of this, I found myself observing the intricate dance of interactions, the way some relatives reached out with warmth and openness, while others held conversations across the table as if building invisible walls. The atmosphere was layered, full of history, affection, and unspoken tension. Grandpa's presence was central to the gathering, a patriarch whose calm presence could simultaneously soothe and command. His slight smiles and occasional nods were signals that the family gathered around him understood intuitively. He was both the keeper of stories and the embodiment of the family's continuity. His health, while still robust for his age, was a subtle reminder of the passage of time and the inevitability of change. As the meal progressed, there were moments where the conviviality felt almost too delicate, as if a single misplaced word could shatter the fragile peace. Underneath the laughter, the glances exchanged, and the shared stories, there was a tension brewing, an undercurrent that hinted at conflicts ready to surface. In that room filled with love and rivalry, celebration and restraint, past and future collided. The family dinner was more than just a meal. It was a microcosm of all the emotions, histories, and relationships woven through our lives. It was a moment suspended in time, a gathering of souls bound by blood, but separated by experiences and perceptions, soon to be tested by forces that would challenge the very definition of family itself. This dinner, with its laughter and silences, toasts and whispered glances, set the stage for an unforgettable reckoning. A night where words would shatter masks, reveal hidden truths, and force us all to reconsider the meaning of belonging, loyalty, and love. The table was set not just with food, but with the raw ingredients of a family on the brink of transformation. As dinner progressed, the room was filled with the usual chatter and laughter, the clatter of cutlery, and the smooth passing of shared dishes. Yet, beneath the surface warmth, a simmering tension was palpable to those who knew where to look. The delicate interactions balanced on a precarious edge, and it was only a matter of time before the invisible pressure broke through. That moment came abruptly and without warning. Aunt Clara, whose sharp tongue and protective nature were well known within the family, suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. All eyes turned to her, the noise halting the flow of conversation like a sudden gust dousing a fire. Her face flushed with anger, her eyes blazing with a fierce intensity that commanded attention. Then, with a voice loud enough to silence the entire room, she shouted, "You're not family!" The phrase hung in the air like a thunderclap, shocking everyone into stunned silence. The words were not merely an insult, they were an outright rejection, an emphatic declaration that severed bonds that many had assumed were unbreakable. The tension that had been simmering beneath polite smiles and gentle toasts exploded in a few violent syllables. The person to whom her words were directed, the narrator, felt the full weight of the accusation as if a physical blow had landed. A wave of disbelief, hurt, and confusion swept over the room. Faces turned toward me, some sympathetic, others uncertain or even disapproving, as the shock rippled through the gathered family. Aunt Clara's outburst was shocking not just for its harshness but for its timing and context. Family dinners were usually places of careful diplomacy, where grievances were masked or deferred to maintain peace. But tonight, faced with too many years of unresolved conflicts and unspoken resentments, her pent-up frustration found a voice, cutting through the facade of harmony. The room held its collective breath as Aunt Clara's words echoed in everyone's hearts. Some family members stared at her in disbelief, while others nodded silently, acknowledging perhaps a truth they dared not speak aloud. The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with the unspoken consequences of such a declaration. Attempts to respond were stifled by the weight of the moment. My voice caught, struggling to find words that could match the intensity of the accusation. Others tried to break the silence with cautious questions or gentle reassurances, but the damage was done. The label of exclusion had been cast, and it was a wound that reached deep into our family's fragile bonds. The outburst sparked an immediate ripple effect. Some guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Exchanges of glances became more frequent, and a charged electricity filled the room. The joyous mood of the dinner was instantly fractured, replaced by a raw and painful reality that no one could ignore. In that singular moment, Aunt Clara's harsh pronouncement revealed the underlying fractures in our family. Fractures born of past conflicts, betrayals, and misunderstandings. It was a declaration that challenged the very foundation of who belonged and who was deemed an outsider within the complex web of relationships we all navigated. The dinner table, once a symbol of unity and shared history, became a battleground for old wounds and contested loyalties. Aunt Clara's words were not just a personal attack. They were a challenge to all of us, to confront the hidden divisions that had threatened our family's cohesion for years. What followed in the minutes after her outburst was a mixture of silence, whispered conversations, and difficult emotions. Shock, anger, shame, and sorrow. The family had crossed a threshold, moving from fragile peace to open conflict, all triggered by those three devastating words that redefined the boundaries of family that night. The moment Aunt Clara shouted, "You're not family," the room's atmosphere shattered like glass underfoot. The eruption of raw emotion unsettled everyone present, turning a once warm and festive dinner into a charged, uncomfortable encounter. An emotional battleground where long-hidden wounds suddenly bled openly. The initial shock silenced the table. Forks paused midair, eyes widened in disbelief, and strained whispers spread like wildfire. Plates of food sat untouched as family members exchanged uncertain glances, unsure how to proceed after such a potent accusation. The words hung heavy, loaded with rejection and anger, fracturing the fragile veneer of familial harmony. Immediate reactions varied sharply. Some relatives looked away, their faces pale or flushed with embarrassment, as if trying to distance themselves from the scene. Others fixed Aunt Clara with stunned or disapproving stares, grappling with whether to confront her or seek to soothe the tension. The younger cousins, sensing the gravity of the moment, fell silent, confusion shadowing their innocent faces. I sat frozen, the weight of the words pressing down on me like a physical blow. Anger, hurt, and confusion swirled within me, mingling with an undeniable sting of loneliness. To hear such a repudiation from someone who wielded influence in the family, it cut deeper than I anticipated. Yet, amidst the pain, a quiet resolve began to grow, tempered by the awareness that this moment marked a turning point. The family tried various ways to defuse the situation. Some whispered encouragement, urging calm and understanding, while a few brave voices attempted to mediate, reminding everyone that a dinner was not the place for personal attacks. Others simply fell into silence, tension thickening the air as the memories of old resentments surfaced silently alongside. Conversations splintered into hushed, side-table exchanges. Beneath the polite facade, underlying issues quickly surfaced, long-standing accusations of favoritism, perceived betrayals, and feelings of exclusion that many had guarded jealously, but never dared to voice so openly. Aunt Clara's outburst had pulled back the curtain on these festering wounds, crystallizing years of frustration into a hard, painful reality. The dinner's mood was irrevocably altered. What had been light-hearted laughter and familial warmth now bore the weight of suspicion, hurt, and unresolved conflicts. The shared stories and jokes ceased as the gathering shifted into a collective reckoning with fractures and divides too deep to ignore. Yet, amid the emotional turmoil, there were subtle moments of empathy. Some family members, seeing the raw pain in my eyes and hearing the quiet courage in my voice, began to offer tentative support. Others hesitated, caught between loyalty to Aunt Clara and their own desire for peace. The family dinner, once a symbol of unity, now reflected the complex and messy reality of relationships tested by time, change, and unmet expectations. That night's fallout extended beyond the dining room. The echoes of the outburst traveled into private spaces, texts, phone calls, and hushed conversations late into the night. Family members wrestled with their feelings, questioning allegiances and confronting uncomfortable choices. The simple act of sharing a meal had exposed fissures demanding attention and resolution. Ultimately, the emotional aftermath of Aunt Clara's words revealed that beneath the surface of family gatherings lay deep, unresolved struggles. The dinner was no longer just about food and celebration but about identity, belonging, and the pain of exclusion. It was a moment forcing us all to face truths we had long avoided, setting in motion events that would challenge and redefine the meaning of family for years to come. Throughout the tense and emotional dinner, Grandpa remained a quiet but powerful presence, his demeanor revealing depths of understanding beyond what was spoken aloud. As Aunt Clara's outburst echoed through the room and families reacted with shock and turmoil, Grandpa's expression was composed, yet his eyes reflected a mixture of pain, reflection, and unspoken resolve. Sitting at his usual place at the head of the table, Grandpa seemed to observe not just the surface drama but the complex web of emotions and history that fueled the conflict. His slight furrowing of the brow and the subtle tightening of his lips suggested the heaviness of the moment weighed on him deeply. It was as if he carried not only the role of patriarch but also the burden of decades of family tensions and regrets. His calmness in the face of chaos provided a fragile anchor, a reminder of the family's long-shared history and the ties that bound them even in conflict. Where others reacted with vehemence or shock, Grandpa's quiet presence spoke of endurance and the tempered wisdom of someone who had witnessed many storms before. At times during the outburst, he exchanged fleeting glances with certain family members, silently acknowledging their pain or disappointment. These moments revealed a subtle communication, an attempt to foster understanding amid division, even when words failed. His gaze sometimes softened when directed toward the narrator, suggesting a quiet empathy and recognition of unspoken truths. Despite his apparent stoicism, Grandpa's body language betrayed the inner turmoil he experienced. A sigh escaped him when the tension reached its peak, his shoulders momentarily sagging under the weight of unspoken regret. His hands, calloused from years of labor and stewardship, rested firmly on the table as if grounding himself amid the emotional tempest surrounding him. Later, as conversations around him became fragmented and whispers grew conspiratorial, Grandpa withdrew briefly from the gathering, a solitary figure walking slowly outside or retreating to a quiet room. These moments alone were a silent testament to the internal battles he waged, between loyalty to family traditions, the pain of fractured relationships, and a yearning for unity and peace. He did not intervene hastily or raise his voice, but his silence spoke volumes. It suggested a man who understood that some wounds needed more than immediate words. They required time, reflection, and thoughtful action. His quiet authority held a promise that whatever path the family took next, he would remain a steady, albeit weary, pillar. Grandpa's role during that fraught dinner was that of a watcher and protector, a guardian of family legacy who, despite the storm, refused to abandon hope. His composed exterior masked the profound impact of the events unfolding, revealing layers of empathy, sorrow, and reluctant acceptance. In those moments, Grandpa became more than a figurehead. He embodied the complexity of family itself, love intertwined with pain, authority tempered by vulnerability, and the enduring hope for reconciliation even when harmony seemed out of reach. His quiet observation was a silent call for reflection, signaling that the choices made in that room would resonate far beyond a single dinner, shaping the family's future and the meaning of their shared bonds. Minutes after the charged atmosphere of the dinner had reached its peak, with hurt and tension hanging palpably in the air, Grandpa quietly signaled for me to join him away from the crowded dining room. His request was simple but solemn, and the urgency of his tone left no room for hesitation. I followed him through the dimly lit hallway to a quiet study, where the familiar scent of aged books and polished wood created a calm refuge from the storm inside. Seated at his sturdy desk, Grandpa reached into his pocket and, with deliberate care, pulled out a small, well-worn set of keys. The metal glinted softly in the muted light, each key carrying its own history and significance. Without a word, he extended them to me, the gesture heavy with meaning. For a moment, silence filled the room, thick with unspoken messages. The handing over of the house keys felt like more than just a transfer of property. It was a profound act of trust and acknowledgement. The house, a place steeped in family memories and tradition, symbolized continuity, belonging, and responsibility. To receive those keys meant being chosen as a keeper of the family's legacy, a mantle that came with both privilege and weight. Grandpa's eyes, usually steady and measured, held a softness and subtle intensity as he watched my reaction. It was clear that his decision was not made lightly but was rooted in deep conviction. In that quiet moment, the noise and pain from the dinner seemed to fade, replaced by a silent understanding between us. The gesture also carried an implicit message of inclusion, an affirmation that despite Aunt Clara's words and the fractured family dynamics, I was firmly recognized and valued in Grandpa's heart and vision for the family's future. It was a reminder that family ties were not always defined by loud declarations or unanimous approval, but by acts of faith and connection. As I accepted the keys, a surge of emotions washed over me. Pride, gratitude, and an acute awareness of the responsibility now entrusted to me. The keys represented trust, legacy, and hope, elements that I knew would define the difficult journey ahead with my family. Grandpa's calm voice finally broke the silence, offering words that framed his gesture not just as a gift but as a charge. He spoke of the house as a sanctuary, a place where family history was preserved and where future generations could find grounding and belonging. He entrusted me with guardianship not only of bricks and mortar but of memories, values, and the fragile threads that held us together. The moment was transformative, a quiet pivot in the evening's chaos, offering a beacon amid the uncertainty and conflict. It marked the beginning of a new chapter, where personal bonds and legacy intertwined, challenging me to rise above old wounds and to honor the faith placed in me. In giving me those keys, Grandpa passed on more than just access to a physical space. He passed on a symbol of hope, renewal, and the enduring power of family amidst trials. That intimate exchange, made in the quiet aftermath of emotional upheaval, became a defining moment, a silent vow to carry forward the family's story with both humility and strength. After handing me the keys in the quiet of his study, Grandpa spoke with a gravity that underscored the significance of his gesture. He explained that the house was more than just a building. It was the heart of our family's heritage, a place where generations had lived, loved, and endured together. Entrusting me with the keys was his way of affirming his confidence in me as a custodian of this legacy. He shared memories of the house's history, from the earliest days when his parents built its foundation by hand, to the milestones that filled its rooms with joy and sorrow alike. Each corner held a story, each room a piece of our shared past, he said. Maintaining the house meant honoring these stories, preserving the family's roots, and ensuring that future generations would feel the same connection to their ancestry. Grandpa revealed that his decision to give me the keys was also influenced by years of observing family dynamics, the fractures that had grown over misunderstandings, grievances, and unspoken resentments. He saw in me a willingness to listen, a desire for reconciliation, and a commitment to the family's well-being that had not always been apparent in others. For him, this act was both a reward and a responsibility. He acknowledged the recent turmoil at the dinner, the harsh words spoken by Aunt Clara, and the tension that threatened to unravel the family's bonds. But unlike the discord elsewhere, Grandpa's gift was a peaceful and hopeful act, a vote of faith in renewal and healing. He urged me to use the house not as a dividing force but as a gathering place, a sanctuary where fractures could begin to mend through shared presence and understanding. Grandpa's voice carried both warmth and urgency as he impressed upon me the weight of this responsibility. The keys were not merely for access but symbolized trust. Trust that I would carry forward the family's values with integrity, protect the sanctity of our history, and foster a spirit of unity even in difficult times. He also confided quietly about his fears and hopes, sharing that while he could not control how the family would evolve, he wished to leave behind something enduring, something that could anchor us when the storms of conflict and change inevitably came. The house, he believed, could be that anchor. Our conversation lingered on the importance of forgiveness, understanding, and the courage it would take to navigate complicated family relationships. Grandpa expressed his belief that true family was not simply those who shared blood but those who chose to care, to listen, and to rebuild bridges. As he concluded, Grandpa looked at me with a mixture of pride and tenderness, placing a hand on my shoulder, the gesture sealing his trust and support. He reminded me that while the path ahead might be challenging, I was not alone in this journey. The house, the keys, and his faith were my inheritance, lighting the way forward. That moment became a quiet turning point. Grandpa's explanation transformed the simple act of giving keys into a profound declaration of hope, responsibility, and belonging. It was a private promise that amid family discord, trust and love could still prevail, anchored by the legacy we carry and the choices we make to honor it.
A motivação da tia Clara para soltar aquela frase tão dura, "Você não é da família", durante o jantar carregava em si anos de mágoas, ressentimentos e histórias não resolvidas que moldaram seu comportamento naquele momento. Para entender sua explosão, era preciso mergulhar no passado da família e nos segredos ocultos que permeavam nossas relações. Clara sempre fora uma mulher de personalidade forte, marcada por um senso rígido de justiça e uma necessidade quase obsessiva de proteger o que é dela dentro da dinâmica familiar. Desde jovem, ela se sentiu desafiada pela diversidade das relações e, em especial, pelos laços menos convencionais, como o meu, que de alguma forma, para ela, parecia menos legítimo ou quebrado. Sua relação com alguns membros da família era particularmente complicada. Diferenças de opinião, valores e escolhas de vida criaram distanciamentos que nunca foram plenamente superados. Em especial, Sua visão das obrigações familiares incluía expectativas pontuais sobre comportamento, presença e participação nos eventos, e ela interpretava minha postura como uma ausência de compromisso, quase uma rejeição silenciosa que ela levou para o lado pessoal. Além disso, havia feridas antigas, disputas por heranças, decisões de nossos pais que contrariaram expectativas, e episódios envolvendo discordâncias com meu próprio pai, que Clara usava como justificativa para sua visão crítica sobre mim. Ela se via como guardiã das tradições e da pureza da família, o que a levou a agir com dureza contra quem ela considerava estar fora do padrão familiar que defendia. No fundo, sua explosão era também fruto de frustrações acumuladas, um grito para ser ouvida, um pedido desesperado para reafirmar seu lugar e afirmar um senso de controle em meio a uma rede complicada de emoções e lealdades. Clara carregava um medo de perder sua influência e lugar na família, e seu comportamento agressivo era uma forma de enfrentar essa sensação de vulnerabilidade. As palavras duras foram uma manifestação extrema dessa luta interna. Embora severas, elas revelaram o tamanho das feridas emocionais e o desejo, mesmo que mal expressado, de manter algum tipo de conexão, ainda que por meio do confronto. Para ela, demarcar limites era proteger o que considerava a essência familiar, ainda que o preço fosse quebrar pontes. Essa explosão também despertou questões não resolvidas entre outras famílias, amigas e parentes próximos, que desde então passaram a avaliar as próprias dinâmicas e a presença de rancores silenciosos. Ela, em sua verdade distorcida, via-se como alguém que agia em defesa da família, mesmo que sua forma de fazer isso tenha causado dor e afastamento. Compreender a tia Clara, portanto, exige enxergar além da inscrição direta das palavras e reconhecer a complexidade dos vínculos e das histórias que transcendem o presente. Seu grito foi um eco de conflitos passados, desentendimentos arraigados e uma luta pela preservação do que ela acreditava ser a verdadeira família, ainda que essa visão fosse, muitas vezes, excludente e dolorosa para os outros. Assim, o "você não é da família" foi tanto uma ofensa quanto um pedido implícito para que os laços fossem questionados, explicados e, quem sabe, superados. Um convite tácito para olharmos para as cicatrizes carregadas e começarmos a confrontar o que nos distancia, abrindo, talvez, espaço para o entendimento e a reconciliação.
The moment Grandpa handed me the house keys after Aunt Clara's outburst shifted the family's power dynamics and loyalties in profound ways, unsettling the established balances and forcing everyone to reconsider their roles within the family structure. His decision was not merely about property. It symbolized a realignment of influence, trust, and authority that rippled through the relationships we thought we understood. For decades, Grandpa had been the unquestioned patriarch, the anchor around which the family revolved. His approval had been the quiet currency of validation, and his judgments shaped how conflicts were resolved or left to fester. By entrusting me with the keys, he was signaling a transfer of his confidence, endorsing me as a guardian of the family's legacy and values. This act implicitly challenged existing hierarchies and loyalties, particularly those held by Aunt Clara and others who had long positioned themselves close to Grandpa's favor. The keys became a tangible sign of shifting alliances. Family members who had doubted my place or perceived me as an outsider now had to confront the reality that Grandpa recognized and trusted me. This acknowledgement empowered me with not only symbolic but also practical authority, a chance to influence family decisions, access the family home, and perhaps serve as a mediator where others had failed. At the same time, the gift stoked tensions among those who felt sidelined or threatened. Aunt Clara's earlier accusation revealed her fear of losing control and influence. Grandpa's gesture was a direct rebuke to such attempts at gatekeeping. It unsettled those who had relied on established roles and alliances to maintain their standing within the family, prompting some to sharpen their defenses or reconsider their loyalties. The redistribution of power introduced uncertainty and competition into family interactions. Conversations became more guarded. Small gestures and words carried new weight as family members tested boundaries and sought to position themselves favorably in the evolving landscape. Trust, always delicate, became even more complex as allegiances shifted between old patterns and new realities. This transformation also opened opportunities for healing and renewal. Grandpa's decision hinted at his hope that new voices, potentially more open, empathetic, and committed to unity, could help bridge divides. The keys symbolized not just ownership but stewardship, inviting a more inclusive approach to family affairs that could challenge past divisions and foster reconciliation. However, this hope came with challenges. The shifting dynamics required navigation of deep-rooted resentments and complex emotions. Some family members resisted change, clinging to traditions and power structures they saw slipping away. Others embraced the chance for fresh starts but faced the difficulty of overcoming suspicion and past grievances. In essence, Grandpa's gift marked the beginning of a subtle but significant reordering within the family. It brought to the surface questions about authority, belonging, and who gets to define family identity. The keys were a catalyst, compelling the family to face uncomfortable truths and inviting a reevaluation of roles that had long been taken for granted. The balance of power was no longer static. It had become a living, evolving negotiation shaped by history, emotion, and the choices Grandpa made in his final moments of influence. How this realignment would unfold, whether toward deeper division or greater unity, remained uncertain, but it was clear that the family could never return to the status quo. Grandpa's gesture thus redefined the family's internal landscape, reminding us that legacies are not merely inherited but actively shaped through trust, responsibility, and the courage to embrace change amidst conflict. It was an invitation to rebuild the family, challenging us all to reconsider what it means to belong and to lead within the complicated world of kinship. The gift of Grandpa's house keys sparked a surge of conflicting emotions within me, plunging me into a complex internal struggle that rippled far beyond the physical act of receiving a symbol of trust. My heart swelled with gratitude and a quiet sense of validation, yet beneath that pride lay a tangled web of doubt, responsibility, and emotional turmoil. First came the overwhelming feeling of being seen and accepted. Amid the harsh accusation from Aunt Clara, who had declared, "You're not family," Grandpa's gesture served as a powerful counterpoint. It was an affirmation of my place within the family, a recognition that transcended bloodline debates and past resentments. This recognition stirred a newfound sense of belonging that I had long craved but had not fully expected to receive. Yet, alongside the relief and pride, a weight settled on my shoulders. The keys symbolized more than just physical access to the family home. They represented responsibility, stewardship, and the burden of legacy. Accepting them meant stepping into a role that demanded care, diplomacy, and the courage to face the many fractures within the family. It was an honor, yes, but also a heavy obligation that filled me with uncertainty. The moments after receiving the keys were filled with a whirlwind of thoughts. What did Grandpa truly expect from me? How could I navigate the emotional minefield that was our family, torn by divisions and old wounds? Would I be able to uphold the ideals he entrusted to me? Or would the struggle simply deepen existing conflicts? The questions loomed large, and no easy answers presented themselves. Complicating my feelings further was the awareness of how others might perceive this passing of trust. I could already sense whispers of jealousy, suspicion, and resentment, especially from those like Aunt Clara, who had vocally challenged my place within the family. This awareness stirred a kernel of anxiety, as I realized that acceptance by Grandpa might provoke alienation from others, widening divides rather than closing them. At the same time, I wrestled with my own sense of identity. The gift forced me to confront who I was within this family, what my role had been and what it could become. It demanded that I reconcile my past feelings of exclusion with this new mantle of responsibility. The keys became a mirror reflecting not only the house but the person I was invited to grow into. Amid this internal conflict, hope also flickered. The trust Grandpa placed in me opened a path toward healing and renewal. It offered a chance to build bridges where walls had been raised, to foster dialogue where silence had prevailed, and to transform fractured relationships through patience and empathy. Ultimately, the gift ignited a profound personal journey, not just of managing physical property, but of navigating complex family dynamics with grace and strength. It called for vulnerability and resilience, demanding that I embrace both the honor and the challenges intertwined in this legacy. In the quiet that followed the dinner's storm, I felt both lost and found, caught between the pain of past rejection and the promise of new beginnings. The house keys became a symbol of this duality, a key to not only a family home but also to the uncertain and fragile future I was now entrusted to help shape. The gift of Grandpa's house keys sparked a surge of conflicting emotions within me, plunging me into a complex internal struggle that rippled far beyond the physical act of receiving a symbol of trust. My heart swelled with gratitude and a quiet sense of validation. Yet beneath that pride lay a tangled web of doubt, responsibility, and emotional turmoil. First came the overwhelming feeling of being seen and accepted. Amid the harsh accusation from Aunt Clara, who had declared, "You're not family," Grandpa's gesture served as a powerful counterpoint. It was an affirmation of my place within the family, a recognition that transcended bloodline debates and past resentments. This recognition stirred a newfound sense of belonging that I had long craved but had not fully expected to receive. Yet, alongside the relief and pride, a weight settled on my shoulders. The keys symbolized more than just physical access to the family home. They represented responsibility, stewardship, and the burden of legacy. Accepting them meant stepping into a role that demanded care, diplomacy, and the courage to face the many fractures within the family. It was an honor, yes, but also a heavy obligation that filled me with uncertainty. The moments after receiving the keys were filled with a whirlwind of thoughts. What did Grandpa truly expect from me? How could I navigate the emotional minefield that was our family, torn by divisions and old wounds? Would I be able to uphold the ideals he entrusted to me? Or would the struggle simply deepen existing conflicts? The questions loomed large, and no easy answers presented themselves. Complicating my feelings further was the awareness of how others might perceive this passing of trust. I could already sense whispers of jealousy, suspicion, and resentment, especially from those like Aunt Clara, who had vocally challenged my place within the family. This awareness stirred a kernel of anxiety, as I realized that acceptance by Grandpa might provoke alienation from others, widening divides rather than closing them. At the same time, I wrestled with my own sense of identity. The gift forced me to confront who I was within this family, what my role had been, and what it could become. It demanded that I reconcile my past feelings of exclusion with this new mantle of responsibility. The keys became a mirror reflecting not only the house but the person I was invited to grow into. Amid this internal conflict, hope also flickered. The trust Grandpa placed in me opened a path toward healing and renewal. It offered a chance to build bridges where walls had been raised, to foster dialogue where silence had prevailed, and to transform fractured relationships through patience and empathy. Ultimately, the gift ignited a profound personal journey, not just of managing physical property, but of navigating complex family dynamics with grace and strength. It called for vulnerability and resilience, demanding that I embrace both the honor and the challenges intertwined in this legacy. In the quiet that followed the dinner's storm, I felt both lost and found, caught between the pain of past rejection and the promise of new beginnings. The house keys became a symbol of this duality, a key to not only a family home but also to the uncertain and fragile future I was now entrusted to help shape. The events of that evening, the shocking outburst, Grandpa's quiet gesture, and the unraveling of old family tensions, marked not an end but the fragile beginning of a new chapter for all of us. Standing at this crossroads, we faced a future uncertain and shadowed by wounds, yet illuminated by the possibility of healing, growth, and transformation. In the days following the dinner, the family wrestled with the profound questions that had emerged. What does it truly mean to belong? How do we define family when bonds are tested by rejection and show of trust? Could love and loyalty survive the fractures exposed in that turbulent hour? These were not easy questions, nor were the answers immediate or clear. As the dust settled, some family members withdrew, nursing their hurts and doubting the future of shared gatherings. Others reached out cautiously, seeking conversations that might bridge the gulf. Therapy sessions, mediated dialogues, and honest, sometimes painful conversations became part of the healing process, a testament to the commitment of those unwilling to let the family slip into permanent division. Grandpa's gift of the house keys became a symbol and a beacon for this journey. The house itself, full of memories and stories, was transformed from merely a physical space into a sanctuary of possibility. It was a place to hold family meetings, celebrate milestones, and confront challenges together. The stewardship entrusted to me carried the hope that the family could find new ways to connect, despite past conflicts. Yet, the path toward reconciliation remained fraught. Forgiveness required vulnerability, humility, and a shared willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Old wounds needed time and care to heal, and divisions sometimes felt too deep to bridge. In these moments, the legacy of the family was tested not by its history but by the strength of its future intentions. We learned that family is not a static entity but a living, evolving network of relationships, complex, imperfect, but resilient. The journey ahead involved redefining what it meant to be family, embracing both the pain and the joy, the conflict and the kinship. In embracing this challenge, we honored the memory of those like Grandpa, who sought to bind us together even as storms raged. We acknowledged the flaws and failures of the past, but we dared to hope for renewal and connection, guided by patience, empathy, and the recognition that love can endure fractures if carefully tended. The evening's events became a turning point, a catalyst that shattered illusions but also opened space for growth. It was a moment when silence gave way to dialogue, when rejection met with acceptance, and when legacies were not just inherited but consciously rebuilt. As we moved forward, the family carried the lessons of that night as a compass. To listen more deeply, forgive more freely, and choose unity over division whenever possible. The house keys were a reminder, not just of property or inheritance but of trust, hope, and the ongoing story of a family determined to find its way through pain toward healing. In the end, the story was not simply about a shouted accusation or a physical gift. It was about the fragile, enduring bonds that define us, the courage to confront our fractures, and the resolve to shape a future where family is not only who we are but who we choose to become.